Welcome to Rges Pre-Algebra. This is Lesson 24A, and we're discussing sections 6.4 and 6.5. That would be regarding circle graphs and rectangle graphs. Now, circle graphs are perhaps the most complex of all the graphs that students make, and you want to think in terms of three columns. You want to think in terms of the amounts that you are going to graph on the circle. You want to think in terms of what is that percentage or decimal part of the whole, and then you want to convert that to degrees. Now recall there are 360 degrees. Okay, in a whole circle. So when you have your amounts, you always want to, in order to get a percentage, we're talking about the parts of the compared to the whole. And when we get the degrees in the circle, we're talking about the parts of the whole. Okay, so we're going to start with the problem. We're going to look at problem, the circle graph number 1 on page 207. So go ahead and get your book if you don't already have it. And I'm going to walk you through this one, and then you want to do all the rest just like it. Okay. So what we have is the Edwards family made a circle graph to compare their 5 greatest expenses each month. They spent $400 on food, $900 on housing, $500 on tithe and offerings, $300 on transportation, and $400 on education. So you'll go ahead and write this data in. When I'm going to ask you to do one of these on the test, you're going to follow this model. You're going to write your data down in a chart. Okay, and so we've got food, 400. We've got housing, 900. Wait a minute, what was it? 400 on food, okay, 900 on housing, 500 on tithes and offerings. I'll just put tithes there, well, tithes and offerings, 500, and 300 on transportation, and 400 on education. So in order to compare in the next column parts to whole, I need to have an entire amount. So I need a total here. And that total would be 9, 18, 21, 2,500. So that's my total. Now how would I get the second column? Here I'm going to need to multiply, or actually divide, the part. Let me get so I can write this, hang on. Okay, there we go. The part divided by the whole. And you're going to, that's 2,500, and you're going to convert that to a decimal. Now what you'll do is on your calculator, okay, you'll type 500 divided by 2,500 equals, you'll get a decimal, and by moving your decimal point over 2 places, you'll have 0.16, maybe 0.1666, whatever, I'm not actually 0.1612, whatever. You round to 2 places, and you're going to get 16%. Now you get out your calculator and make sure that that makes sense to you. The second one will calculate out to 36%, then 16%. Notice how the one above for food is 400 over 2,500, and then 500 over 2,500 rounds to the same amount. Okay, so even though they're not exactly, so this is kind of approximations, right? You're not going to get as clear data as if you would in just a graph, but you're going to get a picture of how the parts relate to the whole. And then, actually, I've done this wrong. Hang on. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention on the labels over here on the left. I'm not doing the arithmetic. Okay, so the 400 is repeated down here for education. That would be the 16%. That's why they're the same. And 500 over 2,500 is going to be, let's see, the ties is going to be 20%. Okay, I think I've got that right now. All right, now what do I do for the next step? The next step is now I need to convert that to degrees. Now degrees, if the whole thing is 360 degrees, then I would take 0.16 times 360 to get the number of degrees for the first one. And so that would be 58 degrees. And the 30 times 0.36 would be 130 degrees. 0.16 again would be 58 degrees down here. 0.12 would be 43 degrees. And the last one, 72 degrees. Now we need to graph it. And so you'll get out your compass, and you'll get out your protractor. You don't need those dashed lines. I'm going to just use those so that I can approximate what I'm going to graph in here, okay? And so I always start straight to the right like that. So you'll draw your circle with your compass. You'll take your straight edge from your protractor or whatever, and you will go ahead and draw a straight line to the outside. Now you're going to measure up. For food, I'm going to measure up 16 degrees. Now, this would be 45 if I were going this far. So 16 would be not too much here. Maybe like that. Okay. And this would be food. And you would label it, and you'd label the amount or the degrees. Sorry, I'm having a hard time there. So, all right, let's try to get that written in better. 16 degrees. There we go. Okay. Now from this point, I'm going to measure over 36 degrees. And that would probably place me, let's see here. Okay, I should be paying less attention to the answers on the paper and more attention to what I'm doing here. Okay, so rather than, that is 16% actually, but we're going to, I guess they do want it labeled in percent, but you're graphing for food 58 degrees. That's the problem with my explanation. Okay, so if this were 90 degrees, this whole quadrant, then this third of it would be 30, then 60, so we're going to be approximately out to here. And that would be food. And then we'll label it by percentage. So that'll be 16%. The next one is going to be 130 degrees. This would be 90. This would be 30. That'd be 120. So we'd probably stick ourselves over to about here. A little bit more. And that is going to be for my housing. And it's going to be 36%. Okay, so notice we're graphing degrees with your protractor, but you're labeling percent. And we did do this once in class already. Okay, so this is housing, and this is going to be, we don't measure degree, you don't label by degrees, you label by percent, so that's 36%. And that's where I was having trouble earlier. Okay, the next one, so that's is going to be 72% for tithes and offerings. 72% is, how much? I'm sorry, 20% is 72 degrees. There we go. So I'm going to measure 72 degrees. So you line up your protractor here. Okay. And you're going to go over, well, this would be, let's see here. We've got 60. Going to be pretty close, I think, down here. Okay. And that's going to be tithes and offerings. And again, we'll label it by percent. And that's going to be 72 degrees I'm graphing, but 20% of the whole. And notice you need these percentages labeled. And the reason why we do is because otherwise all we have is a actually I'm noticing that goes straight down. Yeah, that's all right. That's pretty close actually. Okay, so the reason we need these percentages here, 20%, 16%, is because I have no actual data I can read off the chart. I'm just getting a picture of relationships. So without those values, I cannot work backwards to actual data. Okay, so let's see, the next one then would be 43 degrees, and that's going to be for transportation. And maybe that'd be, I'm not doing this very well because I don't have a protractor with me, but this would be transportation, and that would be 12%, and then the final part, which should be equal to the food part, and that looks pretty close. This probably the housing probably should have been a little larger, but this is education, and this also is 16%. Okay, so that's what I'm expecting of you. Now, pay close attention here. What I need from you at the end, you want the circle. Obviously, you want each portion, which you can't do without a protractor, so make sure you have one. And then you must label the category, you must label the percents, and you must label the graph. And make sure you always label graphs, okay? So that's how you'll do 2 through 4. So you get to practice this 3 times. The critical elements, you'll have your data, you convert it to a percent, and you convert it to degrees. Okay, and I've labeled at the top one how you do each of those. So this does take a little bit of review for you, so pay close attention to what's going on up here. Okay. So once you have your 3 columns of your chart, then you're able to graph according to degrees and label according to percent. All right, so that should be pretty clear to you, I think. All right, now rectangle graphs is the same idea, basically, except we're going to, rather than divide it into parts of a circle, we're going to divide into parts of a rectangle. So I would care what the distance is on this. And again, I don't have a ruler right now, but I'm going to say, for argument's sake, that's going to be 3 inches. Now let's say I have, in the example they give you, in the election for class president, Kathy received 12 votes, Tom received 8 votes, and Ryan received 4 votes. Again, you would need your total. Again, you would need column 2, which is going to be your percent. So you're going to have 3 columns still. And so that's going to be 12 out of 24 divided by 24, and that would be 50%. 8 over 24 would be 1/3, so that would be 33%. And 4 over 24 would be 17%. And I'm doing that on the calculator by taking 12 divided by 24 equals, you're going to get a decimal, right? In this case, right, something like that. or because it's even, you might just get 0.5. Okay, and you're going to round to 2 places. Take 2 places to the right of the decimal, and that's the percent. And make sure you round. Now, what do you think I would do then if I want to divide this? The object is going to be to divide this block or rectangle into 3 parts to illustrate. So what do you think I'm going to do? How am I going to do that? Well, just as before, when I took the portions of the circle, I'm going to now take the portions of the rectangle. And the rectangle, rather than being 360 degrees, is 3 inches. Oops, let's go back to a color we can read. So we're going to take then 50% of 3 inches. How would I do that? I'd say 0.5 times 3. And that would be 1.5 inches. So I'm converting to inches now. The next one, 0.33 times 3. That's really 1/3 of 3. So that would be 1 inch. And the next one is going to be 1/2 inch. Okay, it'd be 0.17 times 3. And it's going to be rounded a little bit, perhaps. Okay, but right now I see, well, what's left over, and what's left over is 1/2 inch. So now I take my ruler and I measure over 1.5, and then you measure over another inch. I think I better go over it a little bit longer. Maybe like that. And this is Kathy. How do you think you'll need to label it? Same as before. Kathy and the percentage is 50%. Then Tom is 33%. And then our last guy, Ryan, is 17%. So it's really the same idea that we just had with, except now I only need a ruler, I don't need a protractor. It's the same idea we had with the circle graph, but we're just taking up a portion of a rectangle instead. If I'd made a larger rectangle, and let's say that's 5 inches, I would do everything the exact same, except when I get to this last column, I would multiply by 5 instead of by 3. So I want you to go ahead and prove to me you can do that by doing those, let's see, you'll have 4 rectangles. Okay. So you might have to, like I say, round a teeny bit because we've got approximations going, okay? But just do the best you can. It should still come up with a nice visual. All right, so that's the end of this unit. Well, this section here.